Welcome to Values&Vibes. Today we're going to talk about intimacy as a value. In this episode, we will go beyond the common perception of intimacy as a purely physical and uncover its diverse dimensions, from emotional bonds to authentic connections. Join us with two amazing guests, Lancaster, CEO and founder of Revalue 180, and Louisa Bulow, business psychologist. They're going to help me to understand and explore a deep meaning of intimacy as a core value and share personal stories and practical tips for nurturing meaningful relationships. Whether you seek deeper connections or are curious about intimacy's power, this episode is for you. Welcome to Values and Vibes. Today we're going to talk about intimacy as a value. So, Louisa, can you explain us what is the definition by Revalue 180 about intimacy?
So the definition for intimacy in our model is to enjoy warm, friendly, and very close relationships with others.
So, Tia, can you explain us what is intimacy and why it's a value?
And that's why I wanted Louisa to read the definition first, because I think people often immediately think, oh, intimacy, that's just with my partner. That's just something I feel with that person that I'm in that maybe loving sexual relationship with. But intimacy is really much more than that. You have intimacy with your mother and your father and your close friends and your children. So intimate moments are kind of those warm, loving moments that you have with each other. And so I think that intimacy extends far beyond what might immediately come to mind, if that makes sense.
I think it's what allows us to bond as well as species. So really, it goes back to, there's an experiment by, I think it was Psychologist, but called Harlow. I think Harry Harlow. I don't correct myself if I'm wrong there, but essentially he took monkeys and took them away from their birth mother a few hours after they were born. And it was to look at attachment theory and put some of them on a cloth mother and some on a wire mother. But I think, or they had the choice between it, but essentially they always wanted to go to the cloth mother, the kind of fake monkey there, because they felt that there was probably more of a bond, or there was maybe more intimacy there than a wired frame of a monkey. And that showed attachment theory. And maybe that relates to this because it's really a necessary component in building relationships with other people.
Yeah, I agree. And I especially think it's a necessary component when you're building deeper relationships with people. I don't think you're going to have intimate moments in every interaction throughout your day. Maybe when you're checking out at the grocery store, or maybe buying a theater ticket. I think those are different interactions. But I think when you're really, maybe meeting a friend for coffee and you're talking about some pretty personal things in your life, those are intimate conversations. Those are intimate moments. So I think that's where intimacy really comes through in a different way than just in that sexual form of intimacy.
What are different types of intimacy? And how does it shape our core values?
But I don't know if it's necessary to say the types of intimacy, because it's like any value in our model. How that manifests for people is going to be slightly different. And maybe some people do view intimacy as slightly more romantic than others. So I think as long as the basis of it, and pretty much the basis for all people, will be about forming deeper connections, as Tia said. But ultimately, remember, humans are social creatures. We're meant to be in packs. So we're meant to be bonding with one another on a level, and that's really what the value of intimacy is representing. How can we actually create our pack and our people?
Yeah, and it's interesting. If I'm going to be honest here, I haven't seen it pop up in too many final eights. Or
I have recently.
Have you? Because I think it's sometimes you can glean more into particular words and their meanings and how they manifest in behaviors in people's lives when we see it in writing their reports, or when we analyzing their data. So I don't know, how have you seen it most recently, which is interesting?
More recently, in perhaps individuals you can think of that come to mind that we've run the training with, and people who I know have had perhaps things in their past or difficult relationships as well. And those are the ones I'm thinking of, literally a couple of people right now, but that had intimacy in their final eight. And perhaps it's now something like, okay, that didn't work for me before. Maybe I will put more of an emphasis on intimacy in my relationships. And that doesn't necessarily mean I'm talking about romantic relationships. I mean both friendships, relationship.
Kind of interesting because my oldest daughter's a writer. You guys know her, Victoria. And I think that she's working on the premise of her next novel. And I think it revolves a little bit around this topic. And I think the character maybe makes a pact to not have any intimacy in their lives. I think it kind of brings me back to a particular scenario that happened in my life that was, it was somewhat traumatic. And I remember saying to an individual that was putting a security system into my home after this particular thing happened, telling this person who was installing my the security system, and not something I would typically just tell the average security person, but I was in kind of a state, and he was doing something and asking about the particular person that I had listed as the contact to call, and so and this person happened to be the person that kind of violated trust in our lives, but I had listed this individual as the person to call if the alarm would go off. And so all of a sudden I just like spilled it. And I was like, oh my gosh, well, then you must have seen what happened in my, in my home, in my house. And I'm just done. I'm not making any more friends. If I have to know somebody for at least 5 years before I'm going to let them into my life. And I'm just going to, close up the doors to my life because it's too painful. And he just looked at me and he's like, what is this woman telling me? I'm just trying to install her security. But before he left, he told me that, he's like, hey, it's none of my business. He said, but I just want you to know that like I install security systems to make money to support my family I have 5 children and my wife. He said, but I'm actually a minister. And he's like, and I don't know what you believe, if you have any faith, but he's then said to me, you have to understand that you can't close the windows and shut all the doors and block out intimacy and love and all of those things in your life, because in order to live, we have to suffer. And sometimes that suffering might revolve around intimate relationships with friends and family. And those might bring a lot of hurt, but that's also brings about the love of life and how we appreciate those people in our lives. So I don't know if that's helpful, but I learned a lot from the security installer that week.
You learn a lot from people when you ask them questions.
Yeah, or when you kind of just reveal a little TMI, too much information.
But tell me, do you think that people who have like in their 8 core values, they have intimacy as a prioritized value? Do they often got, like when I'm sitting somewhere on the parties, a lot of people come to me and they're like, oh, I want to tell you a story. Can I tell you my life story? And I'm like sitting, okay, maybe I don't want to listen about that, but they feel comfortable. And intimacy is not my core value, but I appreciate a lot of intimacy in my life. And I love to, I'm not sharing secrets. I love to listen people and everything. But how people between each other, they know who they can come and say something like, your security guy told you that.
I think, and Louisa, you can comment on this as well. I think that intimacy sits in openness, correct? And also acceptance, I think, sits in openness as well. And I think that
border value.
Acceptance is the border value. And I think that people often know those people. They can feel it when people feel accepted. And I think that that's a quality that you portray in your life, which is a beautiful quality. And that when you accept others and they feel safe, once again, it goes back to that psychological safety we talked about last week. Safety actually opposes in the regulation zone. But so that person is probably feeling that really great balance, that they feel safe, but they also feel accepted, because you're really portraying those 2 qualities very well. And then that, I think, opens the door for those values that are complementing each other in our model and in our lives. Okay, I feel safe and I feel accepted. And therefore I can have this intimate moment with Milena and share my story, because she'll listen, she'll understand, and maybe she'll have some input. And I value that.
Even I promise this year that I'm not going to give advices anymore.
Listen, I've tried. I've made those same promises. I think that what I learned from the security system guy was that he told me, to leave the doors a little crack, not to leave it fully open, to keep it a little half open, and to keep the windows, not all the way closed, but partially open. He said basically what I think intimacy comes down to, and a lot of those kind of more kind of touchy-feely values, is boundaries. I think we just have to have boundaries. And I think I sometimes suffered with finding those boundaries, and then that moves you into victimization mode. So I think that it comes down to having some boundaries.
It's an interesting point, because it's made me think that it's all about, it's like the same, let's take kindness, for example, one of my prioritized values. I'm kinder to some than others, let's put it that way. I definitely feel a need to be kinder to certain individuals I place that emphasis on than other people. Maybe, and that's the same with intimacy, isn't it? You're going to show or activate that value, as we always say, with some individuals over others. So that, what she is saying is making me think of that. But it makes me think as an opinion more than anything, although I know that a lack of intimacy sometimes in relationships can cause loneliness. So for me, it's like, if people prioritize intimacy, has there been loneliness in the past, or has there not been? And there's almost a fear of loneliness. So when people share those things with you, Milena, is that, okay, well, I don't want to be keeping this to myself. That's a lonely place. Maybe I can talk to someone else about it.
Yeah.
I wonder if that comes into play a little bit.
It's, I mean, like all the other values you've, the few that we've discussed already, I mean, it's a tricky one, because I think that intimacy, more than maybe generosity or kindness or even collaboration, are kind of easier words to talk about. Like intimacy,
100%.
sexuality, those types of words are like, oh, people get a little afraid. Even money, people get a little nervous. Like, let's not talk about money. Intimacy is similar, because it's kind of got that touchy-feely vibe to it. But I think that in the way that it's defined by the R180 model, it's really much more prevalent in all of our daily lives, because we're having intimate moments all the time. Every time we pick up the phone with someone that when I speak with either of you, because we work together, I'm having intimate conversations, because I'm sharing, like, my personal thoughts or feelings or my emotions of the day. But like I said, when I'm ordering my coffee, I might be friendly, but I'm not necessarily having an intimate moment with the barista. Or maybe I am. I don't know.
Maybe. Depends on barista.
I wonder if, for me, it's not one of my prioritized dates, but I see intimacy as very, very deep conversations. And I would say some of my most intimate moments have been with my mum and my dad this year, where they're divorced, they're not together, but separately I've had conversations about their lives, which we haven't before. And that bond, we're very close. They're both my best friends, but puts you on another level. It puts you even closer, and that's intimacy with parents. It's not something that we laugh about. It's not sexual. It's not that. It's emotion. It's pure raw emotion. That's what I think intimacy is. You are stood naked in front of people, going, "This is how I feel, and this is how I should. I want to bond with you, and I want to connect."
Yeah,
that's how I experience intimacy.
I agree. There's a vulnerability to.
Is that why people often use, when I was preparing for this, when I would mention I'm preparing for an episode about intimacy, everybody was thinking that I'm going to talk about sex.
Yeah, where sex is just one function of intimacy. I think that obviously, like any kind of sexual relationship, is obviously ultimate intimacy, right? Because hopefully you're not sharing that with everybody. I mean, because maybe you are. If that's something that's that's
and but not all sex is intimate, right?
No, very true.
And so they're not. It's not that sex falls under intimacy. Actually, sometimes, and some people go through very traumatic situations where it's 100% not intimate. Because I think a part of intimacy as well is that feeling of being close, but that feeling of being supported as well. It's coming back to you. With intimacy, it's not just I'm giving out. It's actually that you're getting that feeling back from the other person.
Yeah, exactly.
And you're not judged. You can be open about everything. Nobody's gonna judge you. You can be vulnerable. You can be literally naked. You can be pure you, and nobody's gonna take advantage of that.
Bit of that giving and receiving.
And tell me, why people have, when I speak a lot of my friends who are single, they have a fear of intimacy. But when I speak with them and I said, do you have fear of to be alone for whole life? They didn't even think about that. But they exclusively know that they have a fear of intimacy. They don't even think about that they may be going to be alone for whole life, and they're going to be secure and safe because they're not open to feel intimacy with anybody.
Well, I think that goes back to the underlying kind of behaviors and what they've been probably modeled in their lives. I think that sometimes I often say that Revaluate 180 is a positive psychology model, and it's about moving forward. I think that a lot of that is probably stuck in the past, and maybe that intimacy hasn't been modeled to them. Maybe they weren't shown enough intimacy. I mean, there's a plethora of reasons for why people might feel that way, and you can't venture to guess. But I would imagine that people who have some fear of intimacy, it's been maybe some lack of intimacy in their lives, or maybe it hasn't been modeled in the right way to them. So I think that in those situations, you almost hope that they can see that in their friendship with you alone, that's an intimate friendship. That's an intimate relationship. I think that sometimes for my single friends, and I'm much older than both of you, that they have intimate relationships with people in their jobs and their families and with me, but I often worry about them. And I think because as we age, if you don't have kind of a significant one person that you're, have in your life, or you don't have children and you are single, that can create that loneliness that Louisa is speaking about. And I think that it's harder as we age and as we get older to seek out those intimate relationships because, I don't know, we feel more cautious, we're more protective of our feelings or emotions, maybe being rejected. So, I mean, you wish for intimacy for everybody, I think, even though it's harder to speak about it. You wish people have intimacy in their life.
At least one person. That was what I was
One
saying.
One person.
Yeah.
They used to often say when teenagers, sorry, Louisa, just quickly, they often say when young people are being bullied, that all they need is one friend for them to get through it. And that means one really close, intimate connection, maybe outside of their parents, or maybe they don't have intimate connections to their parents, whatever that may be, that typically that won't be the child that hopefully, ends their life or takes their own life because they're so sad, lonely, depressed, they've been bullied. They have one person they can rely on. That shows how much intimacy matters and how important it really is. Louisa, reread the definition again of how we defined it.
Well, yeah, because that's why I keep looking down, because I'm looking at it the whole time. But to enjoy warm, friendly, and very close relationships with others.
I mean, sure, I think the intimacy, we haven't talked about this, but I think you could even take intimacy into the realm of food, like especially in European communities, Italian communities, Greeks, the Serbians.
I was just thinking that.
Food is a form of love. I mean, for me, like, I spend my time, and I still owe Milena blueberry pie, which she's going to get for her birthday this weekend.
I didn't forget.
It is, it's showing love. Right.
Yeah, and it's a show of love. And I think to me, baking is a form of intimacy in many ways, because it's showing a feeling of warmth for the people that I care about.
Effort as well. You've made that effort.
Yeah.
Because you care enough to. But it's like Lamise, who we work with, says, part of that Arabic culture is like, if you're coming to my house, you're coming and you're having the food and you're sitting down, I'm going to really treat you, right?
Yeah.
And it's that idea.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, but that's all intimacy.
In Serbia, it's the same. We're gonna borrow money to feed you, to show you that we're a good host. We're not gonna eat for a week.
Well, speaking of intimacy, and just speaking of Serbians, it's kind of funny because it makes me think, like, I think that intimacy can be even in a way that people portray in their smile or in their comfortable wave, or like Colin and I were crossing the street from Milam's coming home, and all of a sudden I heard this familiar voice, and it was Nema. And Nema's a close friend of theirs. He was a professional footballer, soccer in the US. And Nema's very effusive, you know what I mean? Like he enters a room and there's always a lot of hugs and kisses in his voice. And so his connections, I think, in general, and he's also very flirtatious. So I think that I'm sure the women all love him. He's got a wonderful wife and daughters, but he's got a general intimacy about him. I think there might be people that just kind of show an intimacy more broadly than others as well, just in their interactions,
Everyone has intimacy to a certain extent, I guess, technically by our model. So it might be lost or forgotten. It might be one that's not as important as other values. I'm honestly having this conversation. It's been enlightening to myself, because it makes me think a world without intimacy would be really sad, because it's not about sex, and it's actually about way more than that. And it's very powerful thing that bonds us as a species.
I do think same. I'm having the same thing. I mean, it's just been one of those values in the model that I
Let
haven't.
me reprioritize.
Yeah, that I haven't contemplated much.
Report we're gonna prioritize.
It may be, because really, when you think about it, at the end of the day, if you look at that definition and you look at everything we've talked about, is intimacy almost equals warmth in a way. It's that
Yeah.
feeling. Louisa started the conversation with the monkeys going towards the cloth versus the wire. They needed that warmth, and we are attracted to people like you, Milena, to tell you your life story, because it's a feeling of warmth. And so when we can have that feeling of warmth in our life, and maybe we don't see it as much, or I haven't as much in my model as a prioritized value, is maybe we take intimacy for granted in some ways.
Yeah, we don't.
It's interesting. I have it as a lost or forgotten value at the moment, according to our model.
When you see the reports, which blocker is often there when it's blocking intimacy?
It's the anchor blocker, because that's the only one I have in regulation. So it's got to be
that one.
Yeah.
Anchor blocker is when you kind of go back to the first initial impression or number or whatever it is that you have in your mind, and it becomes your anchor, and you're always reverting back to it. So it's interesting with intimacy, when we looked at this to do the block standardization, is it that actually you feel, okay, maybe I can't get that deep relationship because this is how you're meant to be with people? Is that how it comes out for certain individuals? Because it's interesting, that's maybe why I'm finding this conversation so interesting, because there's an aspect of intimacy, okay, yeah, whatever, there's a certain sexual side of it, but actually that warm relationships, and I had a bit of a year in 2023, maybe I was missing some of that warmth in my friendships, for example.
What's so great about the model, because everything kind of works kind of together.
It's not made up. We didn't just go here, put that value there, and this anchor blocks it. Anchor blocks it, and that's for a reason, because for me, that's a pattern, right? And then, as we just did, you pick that pattern apart with someone, and that's when it becomes as powerful as it is, really.
Can somebody who prioritize core value intimacy, can he also in the same time prioritize value of independence?
Of independence?
Yes.
Sure.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
There's no right or wrong in the model of what you can and can't prioritize. You can have any mix. That's the beauty of it. It's not a typology. You're not being put in a box. You can see all different forms of combination in people.
Yeah, I guess what I'm asking, I wonder why you're asking that. You asking that question because you think maybe people who are too reliant on their intimate relationships will lack independence. Maybe they want to go somewhere by themselves because they need that person.
I'm asking because of my husband.
Yeah.
If they prioritize both intimacy and independence. Yeah.
What? I mean, how did you prioritize this?
I mean, I think that's I hate to go back to that one again, but comes back to safety again. I think you can be very independent and still have intimacy. I think that it comes down to less like a more of an insecurity feeling for people, and maybe then an intimacy thing. If they don't feel secure, then they might say it's because they always need that intimacy in their life, but I don't think that's the right description. But I don't know. What do you think, Louisa?
I have independence as a prioritized value, and then intimacy technically by the model as a lost or forgotten value. So for me, having this conversation and playing some of it back, the independence is very much like I am who I am, and I need to be able to do what I want to do. Like if I feel there's something holding me, I get physically kind of frustrated by it. But do I wish that still within that, when I'm with somebody or with my friends and that I still have those really warm interactions? Yes, absolutely. So I don't see them as mutually exclusive. You can be independent in your mind and your opinions and what you want to do with your life and how you want to achieve your success. And alongside that, you're taking with your relationships that are intimate. So
I agree with that. I mean, in the model, we also talk about when we get further deeper into it and we do the qualitative questions, is that what we see beyond, like what we also look at is an overuse or an underuse of prioritized values. So if you prioritized intimacy, and if an individual's prioritized intimacy and they've prioritized independence, they could be overusing intimacy and underusing independence. They might still both be important to you, kind of like we talked with money. Even though you might not have a lot of money, you still might prioritize money. So you maybe have a lot of intimacy, and maybe you're like this individual not being you, but you're putting so much emphasis on it that maybe you are overusing that one and underusing independence. I mean, it could work that way, and I don't know.
Intimacy isn't a neediness. It's a desire for close relationships. So it will go back to the monkeys, is that the monkey who was on the cloth, when it needed to feed, it would come off the cloth mother for the time it needed to feed, and then it would come back. So that's still an independent thing of, I need to go get my food now. That's
right. But, you know, I guess but it also, yeah, exactly. But I do think it probably comes down to like what we say all the time is each of us has a different understanding. And we give these definitions, but people sometimes don't even read them. So what one person might believe that intimacy is strongly interconnected to dependence, and maybe others do not. So I think it all depends upon your own interpretation of intimacy, right? Maybe.
And my last question, I'm talking like in the near future, when everybody got their report from Revalue 180, do you think that sharing reports with each other, with family, what our results are, is that going to be a proof of intimacy?
Yeah,
that's a really good question. Really good question.
Think about a team. I think that we really promote using this at teams and organizations. I think that you'd have to get permission from everybody. Let's share our results if people feel comfortable in doing that. And I think that could really be really bonding for a team, because then you're revealing yourself, kind of like we always learn with Utah in a leadership and behavior class. When you kind of lift up your shirt and you reveal a little bit about yourself, other people feel more comfortable and also feel more safe, going back to that psychological safety thing. So yes, definitely. I think amidst a family, amidst a couple, a team, an organization, I think.
No, so I completely agree with the idea of sharing the reports. I worked with a very, very talented coach and business psychologist recently, and she's a firm believer in building trust within a team. And it was a couple of months ago, we worked with a retail management team, and essentially the first thing she wanted them to do was share something very intimate about themselves. It was a trust exercise, because the whole premise was, if we can't build that trust together, how are we going to be able to call each other out? How are we going to say, actually, that's a blind spot of yours? And some of the things that were shared were unbelievable. And I felt so honored sitting there, and I had something to share too, something that I know you're both aware of, but it's something very deep. And the minute you let that out to a group of people, you're stood there naked, vulnerable, and actually it's okay, wow, I'm very proud of everyone. And it makes you realize everybody has something in their lives as well. And it will be probably something that stays with me for a long time, the feeling in that room of fear of, wow, I just said that out loud to my team in work, but actually how powerful that team are going to be now moving forward.
Right.
So back to the report, values sit absolutely underneath that. And Tia and I, you, Milena, we're throwing our values around to each other because we have trust. We're not just saying it for the sake of it. I know that if I tell Tia something about one of my values, or intimacy being a lost forgotten value, you're going to give me something that's actually very valuable to my life. You're not going to sit there and laugh about it, because we have that trust and that foundation. And being able to share a report can only build that. And when we do our group sessions, our team workshops using this, our group report can actually put that together. So are there specific values that actually stand out within a team, that a team share, and therefore that will help them when moving forward on their journey? And are there also blind spots in the team that might be preventing all of them from fulfilling some of those values and that motivation as a team?
Yeah, you know, it's funny is I think to end on that, which is actually a beautiful story, and I think you're right. I think that intimacy creates that other value we spoke of the other day, that authenticity. When you can truly be honest and work in a team and actually reveal bits of yourself intimately, then you are also being very authentic, and that you're in the moment and being who you are and sharing who you are with the team, with the group, with the team. Yeah, just creates just really strong bonds. So I think that's very true.
Yeah.
Thank you so much. Thank you, ladies, for this amazing episode. I enjoy my 30 minutes with you. And next time we're going to do another value. So stay with us and see you soon.
See you soon. Thanks, guys. Bye.
Bye.